And of course, we've been following the breaking story in the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. The changes finally at the top of Westpac. A statement came out from the chairman, Lindsay Maxted, announcing the executive and board changes. We'd been discussing it throughout the morning because the pressure had been growing on the CEO, Brian Hartzer, to quit, to step down. Pressure through the weekend from the government, pressure from institutional advisors.
And he's gone. He'll leave the bank as of next Monday. Ewan Crouch, who was the Risk Committee chairman, is going to be leaving the board or won't seek re-election at the forthcoming AGM. And here's where it gets, I think they haven't gone, in many people's eyes, the full extent. Lindsay Maxted, the chairman, the long-standing chairman of Westpac, who was equally pilloried, along with Brian Hartzer, for a perceived lack of oversight regarding this money laundering scandal. He's announced he is going, but he is not going until sometime in the first half of next year, and I somehow don't think that will satisfy a lot of investors.
What do you think, Mads? Do you think this is enough for people to be happy, the decision that's been made?
Well, clearly what has precipitated this is that there have been discussions with institutional investors over the last couple of days, and that's what Lionel Maxted referred to in his statement. He said in consultation with shareholders and key stakeholders, they have actually made this decision. And we can have a statement here. This is exactly what the CEO, Brian Hartzer, had to say. He said, "As CEO, I accept that I'm ultimately accountable for everything that happens at the bank, and it's clear we have fallen well short of what the community expects of us and what we expect of ourselves." Lisa and Michael, this is a very different message from what we were getting on the front page of The Australian today, where there was leaked discussions from his meeting yesterday, where, as you've been saying, Michael, he was quoted as saying, "This is not another Enron," and essentially telling people to calm down and they could see it through. I do wonder how much the leaking of that meeting has actually fallen into this.
I think it's his version of the Prince Andrew interview, quite frankly. I think that story had a lot to do with what's happened now later this morning.
Because it revealed that he was tone deaf on the mood outside of the top end of town.
And if there's anything that we've learned since the Banking Royal Commission, it's that you can no longer be tone deaf to the mood outside the top end of town. Things have changed. Let's talk about it a little bit more with financial journalist and strategist with Marcus Today, Henry Jennings. He joins us now from Sydney. You've heard our thoughts, Henry, about what precipitated this. What do you reckon?
Morning, Madeline. I think you're spot on, actually. I mean, this was a terrible meeting, and it was probably the Prince Andrew meeting that Brian Hartzer had. And saying that ordinary Australians weren't really concerned about this is just rubbish. I think at the end of the day, ordinary Australians are very concerned about this. Ordinary Australians also are shareholders of Westpac, and they're shareholders of the other banks that are being tarred with the same brush. And we are losing faith in our institutions, and I think that's a very important thing. And I think Brian Hartzer, by his comments yesterday, cancelling the Christmas party. I mean, great. I mean, that's a big move. I think that shows how out of touch and how arrogant some of the senior management is in the banking industry in Australia. And I think, it was inevitable that he had to go. I'm surprised it took so long, to be quite honest. He does walk out the door with $2.6 million for his salary for the next year. So he's not doing too badly out of it, certainly better than shareholders are. And bear in mind that it wasn't that long ago that Westpac actually raised $2 billion from institutional shareholders to shore up the balance sheet, and currently they're going through the SPP, which is the share purchase plan pricing period for retail investors to put into that. So that's going to make that interesting. But I think it was inevitable that he went. I'm surprised that the chairman hasn't gone sooner. I think that's a bad look. The market will be baying for blood now, and I think we want to see the chairman gone and a whole new broom come through Westpac. And I think the fact that they didn't do it sooner is not a good look. And as you rightly say, it is the Prince Andrew moment of the Westpac bank.
So what do you think this is going to do then for its share price, Henry? Are we going to see a rebound this morning?
I think we might see a little bit of a rebound. It is possible, but of course in the background we've got a lot of class action potential. It's a question of how long they knew and what the ramifications were. And again, they raised $2 billion and at a much higher price. So there's a lot of institutions underwater on that placement. So people are going to be rightly pretty miffed about what's happened. And that's not to say the retail shareholders won't join class actions as well. So this is going to be an ongoing sore for Westpac for some time to come. It's not going to be easy to placate the market, I think, and it's going to cast a long, long shadow over Westpac for at least the next 6 months, I would imagine, especially if Lindsay Maxtek is still there at the helm as chairman. And of course, Peter King was the CFO taking over. So it's all very internal at the moment. They will probably be tarred with this brush until they get an outsider in to clean the decks.
And as you say, they're just in the middle of beginning this revenue-raising process. They're hoping to raise $500 million, but it's worth pointing out that they could be in for more than $1 billion in potential fines because of these allegations. What does it do to its balance sheet?
Well, that's exactly right. It would be ironic that the money they raise from institutions and from retail shareholders, $2.5 billion, a lot of that actually goes back to the government and AUSTRAC in fines. You have to remember that CBA got fined $700 million for their indiscretions in terms of money laundering, and these are certainly a worse case. And certainly when you look at the figures, and 23 million instances rolls off the tongue, and to say that that wasn't of interest to the man in the street is ridiculous. It certainly didn't pass the pub test. 23 million is a lot of indiscretions that a bank has done in terms of anti-money laundering. So I think it's going to hurt Westpac for some time to come, and it's very hard for them to get clean air, I think, at the moment, even with Brian Hartzer gone. So we'll wait and see what the market thinks, but I suspect the SPP that's currently running the pricing period anyway is going to be interesting, to say the least. And it may be in years to come that we look back on this and say that was, it was a bargain time to buy Westpac. I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember when Westpac nearly went to the wall back in the 90s and had to do a rights issue at $2.50, which AMP bailed them out of with Kerry Packer. So it's. So
we forget it. We forget about those times because
we do.
It's been so long that they have been the four pillars and propping up the ASX. I just want to ask you, Henry, just for ordinary people like us, we wonder what it is about these guys, and they're mostly guys in these boardrooms, which makes them think that they don't need to take responsibility. That takes 5 days to actually take responsibility for this. Well, you're exposed to a lot of these board meetings, to a lot of meetings with these important executives. Is it just a different take on reality?
I think it is. I think they're so wrapped up in their own bubble and their own importance that they get very used to that, and used to that rarefied atmosphere. I mean, Scott Morrison calls it the Canberra bubble. There's certainly a boardroom bubble as well. And a lot of the analysts and the brokers in the businesses that are analysing them, they're extremely high paid as well, and some are high profile, and they live in their own little bubble as well, whether that's in Martin Place or in whatever tower they happen to be working in, Governor Phillips. So it is a rarefied atmosphere up there, and certainly for boards, I think it would be good to have an ear to the ground and actually get out and meet some ordinary people, rather than the only time they do it, which of course is the AGM, it seems, when they actually have to face shareholders. And of course the Westpac AGM coming up, and they could actually have a shareholder revolt and spill the whole board at this AGM, and I don't think they've done enough to prevent that as yet. So certainly, from my experience of these kind of upper levels of banking management, they are very wrapped up in their own businesses, their own world, their own remuneration, what it can get for them, and it's very hard for them to connect with the man in the pub.
Some wise words from you this morning. Henry Jennings from Marcus Today. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Madeline.
It is interesting, isn't it, that we're just continuing to see that reckoning that was begun before the Royal Commission, really, but is now continuing. And I think that there is a real culture change. It is progressively moving forward. Unfortunately, it has taken these massive scandals and to actually precipitate that, but there does seem to be a change, as Henry is saying.
He's not going away empty-handed, Hartzer.
No.
He's getting his 12-month salary, $2.686 million.
Henry made the salient point that they are so far removed from everybody else in society, and I guess the more millions they earn, the more insulated they become from the rest of Australian society and what the mainstream thinking is in Australian society, and that became very, very clear from those comments of Brian Hartzer reported on the front page of The Australian this morning.
The Big Four do operate in a completely rarefied position in the Australian economy, and we are starting to see some changes with that, but it's still making its way through.